failing to enforce a 2012 ICE detainer against illegal immigrant Miguel Luna, who was later able to beat and rape 3 women. Mr. Luna was sentenced to 80 years in prison on Monday. Let me tell you about 2 more stories. Sad stories, tragic stories. Haley King was just 18 years old when in November of 2016, she was fatally hit by a speeding truck. The driver, an illegal immigrant named Sergio Rodriguez. He didn't stop after the accident because he feared being deported. And it doesn't get more tragic than this. Dimitri Smith lived for just 1 minute outside her mother's womb. He was delivered in an emergency C-section after an illegal immigrant crashed into his mother's car in New Mexico in 2012. Haley's mother, Kathy Hall, as well as Dimitri's mother, Eileen Smith, both joined me to share their stories. They're sitting side by side there. Eileen, Kathy, I appreciate you coming on the show, and our heart goes out to everybody who goes through this. As a parent myself, I can't even imagine the sadness that has gone through your family, and we appreciate your taking these moments and being brave enough to come share your stories and your perspective, because I think this country, you have more of a voice than anybody like myself or somebody who hasn't been through this. So Kathy, again, I'm so sorry you went through this, but Donald Trump has brought a lot of attention to the status, the illegal immigrant status. Is that the right thing to do? Are we doing the right thing by talking about the status of these people?
I believe so. My daughter would still be here today if the man would have stopped, if he would have been here legally. I think that if the American public isn't aware of how many cases there actually are and what's going on, Donald Trump isn't going to be able to get anywhere with it.
And Eileen, in your situation, we talk sometimes about the status, illegal, illegal. Sometimes people will argue, hey, that's not really not cogent part of the discussion. But what's your perspective? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think his immigration status or his citizenship status has a lot to say about policy implications going forward and how we handle these kinds of things. You know, if there is a deportation in the mix of this, or if we need ICE detainers or not, that's really important. So as far as policy going forward, we definitely need to look at these cases and include their immigration status.
I mean, first and foremost, we want to remember those kids whose lives were taken far, far too early. But in the case of locking down the border and the immigration policies that move forward, Kathy, what would you like to see happen? What is the right thing that the United States of America should do?
You know, we had a situation with my daughter's case. I've kind of been on both areas of the fence with this one. The borders need to be locked down. When they come over here illegally, they do commit crimes to stay here illegally. You know, I think that if we don't do something about the issue there, it's going to go well beyond the families that you are having on the show. My granddaughter was removed, given to a family that was not us after my daughter died. We are still fighting today to try to get my granddaughter back home with her family where she needs to be. But, you know, so I've had both sides of this issue. My daughter should be here. Eileen's son should be here. Many, many, many other mothers and fathers, and it's going to be a lot more if we don't stop what's going on now.
Eileen, one of the public policy discussions people in Congress are debating, you hear Democrats say that we should get rid of ICE, that Immigration Customs Enforcement should just be abolished. There's some that want more open borders. How do you react to that?
I think I should start by saying that I'm not anti-immigrant. You know, my grandfather came here to America in 1955 and became a citizen in 1960. But those who are coming in illegally and committing further crimes need to be readdressed. And I think this is something that we can easily correct. I don't think anybody in their right mind would sit there and say that we need to abolish ICE. They keep our country safe. God bless those men and women.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's so true. Kathy, Eileen, I want to give you just at each a moment, but tell us about your your loss and how you want us to remember how do you want us to remember Haley, for instance?
Haley was the youngest of 4 children. She was always happy, laughing, loved everybody. She was hard of hearing, and she could play music beautifully. But there wasn't anybody in this world that Haley wouldn't have put her hand out to help if they needed it. And I just, if anything could ever be considered good coming out of this, I'm hoping that her story will get out there and help save some other lives.
And Eileen, what can you tell us about Dimitri and what you were going through at that time as a young mother?
Dimitri was my first child. He was incredible, fully formed, 10 fingers, 10 toes, had my nose, had my husband's hair and chin, fit from elbow to fingertip. That's how big he was when I got to hold him before giving him off to OMI. He was greatly anticipated by my family. It was one of the first babies that we had in decades. And he's sorely missed by his family.
Thank you for sharing your stories. I want to each give you one more chance. If you want to say something to people who serve in Congress, who are public policymakers, maybe let's start with you, Eileen, first, and then Kathy. What would you say to them?
Well, we are doing the Angel Families Rally in September in D.C., so please join us for that. A lot of new Angel moms are going to be there. People who, previously didn't get their story out because they were wrapped up in legal proceedings and things like that. So it would be very informative for sure.
That's good.
In addition to that, wanting to see further legislation to make sure that these people who are committing heinous acts are deported.
Kathy?
I agree with Eileen. Not all the lawmakers out there are against anything going on. There are some very good ones. There are 2 state representatives, 2 state senators that are helping with our case, and then also Senator Tom Cotton has joined on board, and I'll be meeting with him in D.C. In September also.
Well, again, sorry for your loss, and we appreciate you taking the time and having the strength and fortitude to be able to share your story with others. It's heart-wrenching, and our hearts go out to you, but thank you again for sharing your stories and being with us tonight. May God bless you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
For more on the immigration crisis in our country, let's bring in Michael Cutler, a former special agent with INS. It's one of the predecessors to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, often called ICE, and liberal radio talk show host Garland Nixon. Garland, I have no doubt about your heart and your compassion. I know you care about those women. I know you care about those kids. I'm not trying to, in any way, shape, or form, give you anything other than 100% credit about caring. But when we talk about public policy, you hear these women and they talk about the need to target illegal immigrants and deport them, and to deal with the immigration issue, abolish ICE. Where are you on this? And what do you say to those women who say, no, these people should be deported?
Well, I certainly understand, the women. If you have a major loss like that, certainly you're going to be upset. But I think it is an error, and I think it's kind of misleading to use isolated incidents to overlook compelling evidence. As an example, between 1990 and 2013, the immigration population in America more than tripled. But the violent crime rate actually went down by 48%. So the numbers really say that we don't have a problem with immigration
yes, we
and
do,
crime. Just the opposite.
No, we do.
Those are the numbers.
If those people weren't here, they're here illegally. If they weren't here, those 2 kids would be alive today. Do you not believe that?
But here's the thing: stopping immigration is not going to make car accidents go away.
Nobody said no. Nobody said we were going to stop immigration. The United States of America does more than any country on the face of the planet. We legally and lawfully bring about 1 million people into this country. So don't tell me that we're going to stop. Nobody's ever suggested that, ever. And so it's illegal immigration that we're trying to stop. And you do see the difference, right, between the two?
Certainly, I see the difference, but my point being, the numbers still don't say that they are a significant crime problem. In fact, they're less of a crime problem. And when you take individual examples and do that and overlook compelling evidence, I think it's just misleading.
Yeah, that compelling evidence was the first part of our block with those 2 women and those 2 dead kids. That's part of the compelling evidence. Now, joining me here in studio is Michael Cutler. You've dedicated your life and your career to fighting this. What's your perspective on this?
Well, first of all, we have to look at the 9/11 Commission. You know, I provided testimony to the commission. What most people don't know is the second largest contingent of law enforcement officers assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force are immigration agents. Think about it. They violate immigration laws to enter the United States. They commit immigration fraud. Let's also be clear about nomenclature. And this isn't about political correctness. It's about Orwellian newspeak. Illegal aliens are not immigrants. When people say, well, if you're going to talk about illegal aliens, you're being unfair to the immigrants. No, people who won't make the distinction between illegal aliens and lawful immigrants are the ones that are hurting the reputation of the lawful immigrants. The difference between an immigrant and an illegal alien is comparable to the difference between a bank robber and a bank customer. Think about that.
That's right. That's right. It's a good example.
A guy that walks into the bank to take his own money out is a customer. The guy that robs the bank is not a customer. You don't have an inherent right to enter a country in which you're not a citizen. American citizens do. We spend $14 billion a year on Customs and Border Protection. They employ over 60,000 people, including Border Patrol agents and the customs inspectors at ports of entry. And the immigration agents, ICE, back them up. They conduct investigations into fraud. And by the way, I got to make this point real quickly. If you look at the guy that is alleged to have killed Molly in Iowa, this guy is the poster child for what's wrong with immigration. He ran the border. That border needs to be secure, but of course we have 50 border states. But he also committed immigration fraud, apparently by gaining a false identity. If we go with DACA, which we keep hearing about, they're children. No, they're not. The age cutoff is 37. We have to have honest facts out there so that
there is so much of this discussion. Now, Garland, I served 8.5 years in Congress, and I was on the Immigration Subcommittee on Judiciary for a while. One of the things that frustrated me is more than 80,000 times during the Obama administration, people who were illegally, who committed crimes, got caught committing those crimes, instead of being deported, they were released out into the public. How do you justify that? I mean, if you're here illegally and you commit a crime, don't you believe that those people should be deported by default?
Well, now let's not, I know of an example right off the bat of someone who was deported, and that was because they were caught with a joint in 1983. So when you talk about what the crime was the crime killing someone? Or was it that they didn't have a boat, that they didn't have a life preserver on their boat?
So if they're here illegally and they're abusing their, smoking pot, dealing in drugs, either dealing or consuming drugs, you think that they should just be released back out because they're harmless?
Well, what I think that we should have a policy to deal with that, and I think that right now the Republicans have both houses and the White House, and I think that they should come through with a comprehensive immigration plan, which they have.
Garland, let me give you the right answer. In the case of Dimitri Smith, who was killed, this is Eileen Smith's son, who lived like 1 minute. The person who was accused of killing that child had 3 prior driving while intoxicated convictions. Let me turn it over to Michael.
Sure. Look, if you look at the immigration laws and the grounds for excluding an alien, and we know that aliens who evade the inspections process to come illegally know they belong to a category of excludability. It's aliens with dangerous communicable diseases, mental illness, criminals, spies, terrorists, human rights violators, war criminals, and fugitives from justice. If someone runs the border, they're trespassing. What's remarkable is Chuck Schumer wanted a federal law, and you probably know it from your experience in Congress, to make trespass on critical infrastructure or landmarks a 5-year felony. He said trespassing is dangerous. Aren't you trespassing on America when you run the border, evade the vetting process at ports of entry? Yet the same Chuck Schumer and the Gang of Eight said, let's give citizenship to people who trespass on America. The disconnect between the political statements and the reality of why we have borders and immigration laws is astonishing. Those borders are our first and last line of defense against criminals and terrorists. Why in the world wouldn't you want to have consequences for people who evade
the absolute right answer here is to lock down those borders so they can't come back. And if you commit a crime, they should be absolutely deported. Thank you, gentlemen. I really do appreciate your time tonight. The media make a major error in the Michael Cohen story. Details ahead. Welcome back to this Ingraham Angle special, The Left and Lawlessness. One of the reasons the left is able to get away with so much is because the media let them off the hook. Case in point, last month, the broadcast networks went wild over a report that Michael Cohen was preparing to tell investigators that President Trump had advanced knowledge of that infamous meeting between Trump Tower between Donald Trump Jr. and a Russian attorney. Here's a montage put together by the Media Research Center.
Bombshell. President Trump's longtime lawyer ready to deliver the goods.
Sources tell ABC News that Michael Cohen claims that Donald Trump had advanced knowledge of the Trump Tower meeting.
Michael Cohen, the president's former attorney and fixer, claims that then-candidate Donald Trump was aware of the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with the Russians before it happened.
And Michael Cohen claims President Trump knew of the controversial 2016 meeting with Russians that were expecting to give the campaign dirt on Hillary Clinton.
There was only one problem with the story. It wasn't true. Here's what Michael Cohen's attorney, Lanny Davis, said earlier this week.
So Michael Cohen does not have information that President Trump knew about the Trump Tower meeting with the Russians beforehand or even
No, does not.
And here are all the corrections that ran. Yeah. There weren't any. So joining me now for reaction is Howard Kurtz, host of Fox News' Media Buzz. Howard, thank you so much for joining us here. When you see this situation, I mean, the media was just, they got their aha moment. They knew they had him on this one, and they ran it, and they ran it, and they ran it, and then now Cohen's attorney is saying that it wasn't true.
Yeah, we now know that it wasn't true. Michael Cohen doesn't claim it's true. Lanny Davis says it's not true. All that whole montage you just played comes from a CNN story. CNN was the one that broke this exclusive story. It still hasn't been corrected. And, you know, a major problem, Jason, with the coverage of the Trump presidency is that some news organizations have lowered the bar for what they publish. They're too quick to run and gun. They're too quick to put out allegations based on unnamed sources that sometimes turn out not to be true. CNN had a problem with that last year and had to fire 3 journalists over an unsubstantiated story on Anthony Scaramucci. I asked CNN for comment this morning, haven't heard anything back, no public statement.
Well, now the New York Post is out with a story saying that it was actually Cohen who was the person who had confirmed the story in the first place. They must have known that, Howard. How could they not ask him or question him about that? Hey, you confirmed this the first time, and now you're saying it's not true. Doesn't the media, if they know that, don't they have an obligation, a duty, to then follow up with that second question and produce the appropriate apology or correction?
Absolutely, but I would say don't hold your breath. And, you know, it's so ironic because every single day, many news organizations, and sometimes it's part of our job, hammer the White House. Well, you were wrong on this. Is the president lying about that? Why won't you come clean? I mean, it kind of dominates a lot of the coverage, and in the time of investigations you might expect some of that, but when a member of the media, we all make mistakes, but when there is a mistake on a story of this magnitude, claiming advanced knowledge of this Trump Tower meeting, suddenly you don't see that same zeal to correct. Now, Lanny Davis, who, as we mentioned, Cohen's attorney, has said that he was an anonymous source for CNN. He believes he was trying to wave the network off the story. Maybe he wasn't clear enough. He's told me that he regrets that, but then CNN should come out and talk about that. And so say, we now retract the story again. No public comment from the network.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say as Lanny Davis, not Cohen. I mean, he's supposed to be representing him as the attorney, and not clear. I mean, it's sort of black and white in this situation. I want to go back to one that's always bothered me, and I've always wanted to ask you this, but way back when in the day, look at this Time magazine cover. This is a cover story red-handed with Donald Trump Jr., making him look really ominous. I mean, there is still a question about this. What do you make of, I mean, Time magazine goes to great lengths. It's so inflammatory, and even now we're ending up maybe not even true.
I have lost track of all the Time magazine covers that make President Trump, and in this case, a member of his family, look absolutely awful. I presume that cover was from the time of the Trump Tower meeting when Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner had that meeting with the Russian lawyer. And look, you know, the fact that they took the meeting is very controversial. It did appear they were looking for dirt on Hillary Clinton. It went nowhere. But, you know, it's a very accusatory cover, and of course you find the obligatory unflattering picture to go with it.
One last very quick question. When Donald Trump talks about fake news, and you look at the people in the heartland of America, they figure this out, don't they? Don't they figure this out, Howie? Don't they understand that maybe the media is just way too zealous, they're too quick on the draw, and there is a double standard?
Well, I think a long time ago, many people in this country figured out that the media are a little bit tougher on your party, the Republican Party. And I also think that fake news, and I've never particularly liked the term. In fact, in that interview with Fox's Ainsley Earhardt, President Trump now says 80% of the media are fake news. To me, fake is fabricated, deliberately made up. We don't really see very much of that. But what we do see a lot of is unrelentingly negative coverage of this president, sometimes biased coverage, sometimes outrageous commentary. He gives it back, of course. He has every right to do that. Sometimes he goes a little far in his rhetoric. But to answer your question, yeah, the media have lost a whole lot of confidence of a major chunk of the country. And it's sort of on steroids in the Trump era.
Yeah, that's right. Howie, thank you very much. Your show, Media Buzz, airs 11 a.m. Eastern on Sundays. Look forward to it.
Thanks, Jason.
President Trump's recent tough talk aimed at Jeff Sessions is producing some distressing headlines in the mainstream media press, such as this one in the Washington Post. Critics fear Trump's attacks are doing lasting damage to the justice system. Really? Joining me for a debate are Professor Charles Kessler with the Claremont Institute and attorney Jan Ronis. I really do appreciate you gentlemen being here tonight. Look, Donald Trump was elected to be a disruptive president, right? I mean, he was elected to come in and not do the status quo. Now, some would obviously argue with maybe some of his tactics, his tweets, his aggressive nature, but that wasn't he? I mean, that is what he was elected to do, was it not? Jan, I want to give you the first stab at this.
Well, I don't recall anybody suggesting that he was elected to be the disruptive president that he's become. Quite frankly, he's the head of government. He's the head of the executive branch. He's in his vitriol and criticizing, for example, law enforcement, judges, prosecutors, intelligence services, and the way in which he does it. This does not advance the cause of democracy. We are the most civil, ordered government on earth. We've been taught to be proud of our government. We should be. We have a wonderful government. But for the president to single-handedly criticize the people that have worked for him in the manner in which he does advances nothing. I mean, look what he did, how he embarrassed Rex Tillerson. Look how he's denigrated Jeff Sessions. Look how he's suggested the intelligence services, the law enforcement agencies, the prosecutors around the country have been engaging in conspiracies. This does not advance the cause of democracy we've been taught to expect out of a president.
Charles, what's your take on this?
Well, the president has a duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. That means he's in charge of the whole executive branch. He and he alone has the power and the duty to judge the performance of his attorney general and of his intelligence agencies. He alone has the ability to classify material, to declassify it, and to grant clearances for people in his administration and even people like John Brennan in previous administrations.
Now, Charles,
it seems to me he's doing his job.
Yeah, Charles, he was supposed to change the political norms. Is he doing that? Is that a good thing or a bad thing in your book?
Well, I think it depends on what the norms are. Many great, strong presidents have been norm breakers, from Andrew Jackson to Abraham Lincoln in his own way, to Harry Truman, to FDR. It's not unusual for presidents to change the way they do the job, because the job of president doesn't come with a manual, a how-to manual, and it has to adjust to the personality and the times of the occupant. And as long as he remains faithful to the Constitution and to the common good, the president gets to make up a lot of his own job requirements and performance.
So, Jan, do you believe that the resistance movement, no matter what the president does, no matter what the president says, we're going to resist at all levels? We're going to go after this, my words, not somebody else's, a scorched earth type of philosophy that says we can't let anybody have any victory in any place. Do you really think that that's resonating with the American people? Because the economy's been getting better, and I think on foreign policy, you can argue it's a much safer place than it was when from the time Donald Trump took over.
Well, I'm not suggesting. I think, quite frankly, Donald Trump has been his own worst enemy. I mean, look, he came into the office having an opportunity to be a really great president. But the manner in which he's taken to electronic means of communication to denigrate government officials.
No, but I'm asking about the resistance movement. I mean, the Democrats on the other side of the aisle are saying we're going to resist at everything, and we're going to have this scorched earth philosophy. Is that effective in communicating? If you're going to be critical of Donald Trump for being a vitriolic type of personality and, you know, these mean tweets, the resistance movement, I mean, let's go pick on, you know, yell at people while they're eating dinner. Is that really what you think is going to be the winning formula for Democrats?
I don't think that you ought to resist every effort of the President of the United States, just as I thought the Republicans should not have resisted, as they did, everything that President Obama proposed during his presidency.
We didn't do that. That's not true. I was in Congress.
Listen, even I believe the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, vowed that he was never going to let President Obama have any success. The Democrats have not been nearly as bombastic in their opposition to Donald Trump as Republicans were when President Obama was president of the United States.
Yeah, that's the funniest thing I've heard tonight. But I really do appreciate you gentlemen coming and joining us tonight. But that is just absolutely not true. Thank you, gentlemen, both. I appreciate it. It's Friday, so Friday Follies time. Raymond Arroyo here with perhaps the wildest story we've ever had on this show. You will not want to miss this, so stick around. It's Friday, and you know what that means. This next story is so crazy. We're going to have to bring in Fox News contributor Raymond Arroyo to explain this whole crappy story that he has for us. So what's the new job in San Francisco, Raymond?
Thanks a lot. I'm glad you bring me on for this, Jason. But this story is really unbelievable. There are over 7,500 homeless people on the streets of San Francisco. Well, they have now deployed what the San Francisco Chronicle is describing as a poop patrol. Their one mission, and they're getting paid $185,000 a person. Their one mission is to clean up poop on the streets.
How much money? How much money are they being paid?
$185,000 a person, Jason. All they do is pick up poop. Now, there's another patrol force, $700,000 they spend on them. All those four people do are pick up needles from the street. I mean, this is a breakdown. And I will put up on the screen, the full screen of the $72 million San Francisco is spending just to clean up its streets. This is what's called making a truce with illegality. There's no penalty for homelessness. They don't enforce the laws, and public urination is legal. Look at this, $12 million for homeless encampment housing. Okay, just to clean it up, $2.8 million to wash down biohazard material, and $3.1 million for pit stop portable toilets. And Jason, just to give you some sense of what the poor people of San Francisco are going through, the San Francisco authorities receive 70 calls a day from complaints about individuals leaving human waste in public areas. This is a disgraceful situation in more ways than one. It really needs cleanup, both politically and otherwise.
No, I mean, it's sad when you've got a homeless situation. I don't want to minimize that at all, but to pay somebody $185,000 to clean up the human waste, that's unbelievable.
Right. You've got to enforce the law. Build another homeless shelter and teach people basic hygiene. But to just let this go on.
No, they're not solving the problems. Their liberal policies are not solving the problems. That's the issue. I want to get your reaction to another story. Steven Tyler, he was evidently a longtime acquaintance of the president. He's demanding that President Trump stop playing Aerosmith music at his rallies. What's happening here?
That's right. Well, they're acquaintances. Steven Tyler has worked for the president at Mar-a-Lago, at Trump Tower, at other events. He was just here in New Orleans, as a matter of fact, where I'm coming from tonight. Steven Tyler was at Jazz Fest. He was warm. He went out to people. He sang at bars in town. People loved him. But he's not showing the love to Donald Trump these days. He has sent 3 cease and desist letters to the president saying, we don't want to hear you playing Aerosmith's music anymore. Here he is to Joe Rogan. Listen to this.
He calls me up and I said, Donald, you can't use Dream On. That's for causes, not campaigns. And he did anyway. He did anyway. And I had to sue him. I got Dina to sue him. Send him a letter of cease and desist. So I've been through that.
You know, the curious thing here is, I mean, you can enforce copyright, and that's what Steven Tyler says he's doing, enforcing copyright. He says it's for good causes, not for politics. But I don't know how you can stop the public dissemination of music. If you're paying basic ASCAP fees, you should be able to play that music wherever you want, whether it's at a political rally or in a public park or a restaurant. So I don't quite know how this is going to shake out. But Steven Tyler keeps making a lot of noise about this, and the president seems to be telling him, dream on.
Yeah,
we'll see where this goes.
That's too bad. But finally, another story out of Hollywood. This one is off. A new Muppets
profane.
Movie celebrating,
Yes.
I hear, murder. What in the world is that about?
Brian Hansen, who is Jim Henson's son, has created a new movie called The Happy Time Murders. It's not just about murder. It's an R-rated feature featuring puppets that look an awful lot like the Muppets you and I grew up with, okay? I can't even show you clips from this movie. I'll show you this little bit of the trailer. Just watch this.
Hey, handsome. You looking for some rotten cotton? I'm a woman. That's okay. Yeah, that's even better. Got a good time for you.
You know, remember Stadler, Walden and Stadler, the two, Waldorf and Stadler, the two Muppets that sat in the box seat of the old Muppet Show? They used to say it's like a kind of torture to have to watch the show. That's how I feel about this Happy Time Murders movie coming up. There are sexual scenes. I mean, Muppets having intercourse is not something I want to even think about. But this movie is filled with this stuff. And you know, Jason, I sit back. Disney tried this last year when they rebooted a show called The Muppets. And it was trying to restart the Muppet franchise, but it was also off-color, a little raunchy and randy. It didn't work. People rejected it. Why Brian Hansen now thinks a feature will work with filthy Muppets getting killed, slaughtered, and having sex, I don't know. It would be a little bit like the Disney daughters taking Mickey and Minnie and creating animated pornography with them. You don't do this. You're ruining childhood memories, and you're destroying a lovable, sweet family brand that you really could have a big future with, and I think running it into the gutter.
Listen, great stuff. Thanks for sharing it with us. But you're right, they're ruining a brand and destroying memories of kids like me and some others that had fond memories of the Muppets. That's too bad.
I agree. Leave Fozzie Bear alone and let him have his clothes on, please.
Exactly.
At least the bow tie.
A shocking number of charges in Chicago after the city's bloodiest weekend. A full story is next. The most lawless place in America may very well be the west and south sides of Chicago, which are suffering through horrific levels of violence. 3 weeks ago, 75 people were shot in a single weekend, the bloodiest of 2018. But guess how many people have been charged since then? One. That's right, one. Only one's been charged, according to the Chicago Tribune. In a city that's been run by Democrats for decades, should city leaders be taking more heat? Take a look at these statistics. Since 2011, the year Rahm Emanuel, President Obama's former chief of staff, before he became mayor, since he's become mayor, there have been over 18,000 shootings and nearly 4,000 murders in the Windy City. Just unbelievable. Joining me now for reaction are retired police officer Ron Martinelli and Democratic strategist Antoine Seawright. Antoine, I want to go to you first. There's that saying, if you want different results, you're going to have to elect different people. Democrats have been running the Windy City. I mean, what do you say to a Rahm Emanuel? Because his policies aren't working, and after nearly 4,000 murders and 18,000 shootings, don't you think maybe it's time to try something else?
Well, Jason, let me first say how sad and heartbreaking it is to hear those numbers. I think anytime we have someone's child being killed and a mother and a father having to play a funeral, it makes you re-examine this thing called life and why we all do what we do. But I don't think you can pinpoint this on Rahm Emanuel, although he does share some of the blame. This has been going on for a very long time, and while the right, and even you in your opening comments, want to make this about Democrat versus Republican, liberal versus conservative, I think it's a societal problem. When a child doesn't see the American experiment as something to move their life forward, it becomes a problem. Gangs are a problem, not just in Chicago, not just in the inner cities, but they're a problem everywhere, and we have to address the root of the issue, whether it's education, economic empowerment, or just simple things like making sure a child has access to the American experiment the way some other children do. I think that's what we have to do, focus on the root of the problem versus shifting the blame.
No, look, I'm not trying to go after somebody based on their political affiliation. I'm saying that the Democratic policies are the ones that are flawed because they've been implementing those sort of liberal policies and it's not working. I mean, they got some of the tightest gun laws in the country, and yet they have some of the worst gun violence. Their education policies aren't working.
Jason, I'm glad you brought up the notion about gun policies. Well, keep in mind the bordering states around Illinois have some of the most lax gun laws in the country, and it's so easy to go across the border and bring a gun back and do illegal things. Guns are not the problem. It's I guess it's policies and procedures that we have to re-examine all over the country, not just in Chicago. And it's not just about Chicago. The state of Illinois bears some responsibility. I think federal leaders bear some responsibility as well as community leaders. Again, I'm not in the business of pointing blame to left or right or in that matter.
Yeah,
I want to get to solutions.
That's always convenient when the left's been in charge for decades. They always say, oh, well, it's not about the left, but it is about their policies, and the left has been in charge of those policies. Let me bring in...
Name one policy. Name one.
Let me bring in law enforcement officers, somebody who's dedicated his life to this. Ron, what's your take on what's going on in the Windy City?
Well, boy, first of all, thanks for having me on. You know, this is the first time I think I've ever agreed on anything with a Democrat. So I agree with your co-host. These are behavioral issues, okay? They're not gun issues. They're behavioral issues. And I tend to be very apolitical about these things because death and the forensic investigation of death, especially shootings, is something I do every single day, right? And I have 54 homicides on my caseload. And I'm in private practice. That being said, the problem in Chicago is endemic with all of the major urban cities. And politicians, be they right or left, be they Democrat or Republicans, create these problems and, in fact, exacerbate their problems. The politicians are not going to be able to solve these societal and criminological problems. These are multi-phasic
Ron, let me go back for a second. Ron, go for a sec. You have 75 shot in one weekend and 1 arrest. Who do you, is that an acceptable ratio for law enforcement?
No, I can tell you, I can give you even more statistics.
Well, okay, I don't want any more statistics. I want to know the underlying problem with why they're not able to arrest, charge, and convict and put people away that are committing these crimes.
Sure, I'll tell you exactly what the problem is. Number one, we have to change the total paradigm of how communities look at themselves and look at behavior. That's number one. It starts in the home. It starts with good parenting, having both parents there, role modeling, guidance, mentoring. It starts with that. You have to give people hope and opportunity, not entitlement, and not enslave them to the government.
Yeah, Antoine, what's your take on that? I mean, I guess we're just one big, you know, hey, let's just hope, and then we'll get better than 1 out of 75.
No, that's it, Jason. What has to happen in Chicago, and not just inner cities, I want to be clear, because it seems like the right wants to pinpoint some of the issues we have in cities like Chicago and Baltimore. They want to make it just an inner city problem. Keep in mind, these things happen in rural areas too. They just may not get the same level of attention. But what has to happen is that Democrats, Republicans, black and white, rich or poor, people who agree and don't always agree have to come together and identify the root of the problem and then put forth a policy prescription.
And you know what? That's not happening. That's not happening in Chicago. 75 in one weekend.
Jason, just because it has not happened yet does not mean it will not happen. Just because it hadn't happened yet, that does not mean it cannot happen.
Sorry, folks,
it's going to take people who are willing to put aside the differences to come to the table to find a solution.
We're not just one big group hug away from solving this, okay? There's got to be a change, a fundamental change. And that may mean that the president or the National Guard, something's got to change here, because the status quo and one big group hug ain't going to solve it. I thank you for being here tonight. I wish we had more time. I wish we had more time.
You
Thank
and
you.
I agree on that, Jason.
Good. The Confederate Monuments controversy comes to the footsteps of North Carolina's Capitol building. Victor Davis Hanson, one of my favorite people, smartest minds there is, joins us next to weigh in. Thanks for sticking with us on this Ingraham Angle special, The Left in Lawlessness. Earlier this week, we told you about an angry mob that tore down a Confederate statue at the University of North Carolina. Roll the tape. A nice scene for the parents sending their kids off to school the day before school was starting. 3 people have been charged over that incident, and university leaders issued a vague and ominous warning to students today, telling them not to attend a possible Confederate statue rally this weekend. And in related news, earlier this week, state officials announced that 3 Confederate monuments at North Carolina Capitol building will remain in place. Joining me now for reaction is historian and Hoover Institute senior fellow Victor Davis Hanson. Professor, thank you so much for being here. How far do you think the hard left will go to try to erase history that they don't like? And is this the right way to do it? Just tear it down?
No, I don't think they know what they're doing. I mean, history is not melodrama or psychodrama, it's tragedy. So you can have Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was the founder of the Ku Klux Klan, who was a general who was a racist, but then you can have tragic figures like James Longstreet, or the 75% of the households in North Carolina that didn't own slaves, or the 95% of people, and yet they fought for, I think, a bad cause, and for various reasons. But all that complexity gets washed away when we turn history into melodrama. You know, just as a point, 28 years ago, Ken Burns riveted the United States with a brilliant Civil War documentary. It just captured everybody's imagination again, renewed interest. But in that wonderful film, he had Shelby Foote, the folksy, charming Southern historian and novelist, who tried to give a dispassionate but sometimes sympathetic reason why people fought for a bad cause. And at times he even said that he could understand why they defended Southern soil. But are we going to go back now and say to Ken Burns, we want you to cut out all of Shelby Foote's interviews because they promote white supremacy? At least we feel they do. And believe me, many more millions saw that film than saw Silent Sam the statue. It doesn't have a good, Jason, it doesn't have a good history, whether defacing Roman emperors after they were dead, the damnation of memory, or the French Revolution raiding cathedrals and monasteries, or Joseph Stalin erasing all iconic imagery of Trotsky. You know, I'm sitting here in the San Joaquin Valley, and 2 miles in my hometown, where my family's been for 140 years, our city council voted to put an Aztec totem of the snake earth goddess, who was the object of thousands of human sacrifices in the Aztec culture. Above it, they have the inscription, Viva la Raza, long live the race, a racist epithet that was reinvented by the Chicano movement of the 60s, borrowed from Francisco Franco's Spain, when he wrote a novel called Raza, a fascist novel. Am I going to go in there and say, this is awful, and in the dead of night put a hood on and try to topple that? Or if I really do object to that, what I feel is a promotion of human sacrifice or racism, wouldn't it be better in the tradition of Thoreau or Martin Luther King to peacefully demonstrate? When I was told to leave, if I didn't, I would be arrested, and then I would go to jail, and then I would publicize the cause, and then gradually we would find some type of resolution, so, Victor, rather than just to go in a thuggish manner and do that.
You spend an awful lot of time with students. Here we've got these young minds, people going into college at the University of North Carolina. What's the message this sends them, and what should the message be? What should they be learning if they actually do want to affect change?
You're supposed to go to college to learn 2 things, the inductive method of reasoning and come out disinterested, and learn a body of fact and knowledge so you can support your arguments. And we don't really care whether you become left or right. But that's not what universities have become. They've become an indoctrination center. When I go on campus and I see young kids with Che Guevara shirts, or I see posters of Mao on state-supported schools, it's not my right to go there and rip them off and say to a student, Che Guevara personally executed people with a revolver in a psychopathic manner, or Mao Zedong was the greatest mass murderer of the 20th century, probably of all time. 60 million died due to him, and tear that off. I don't have that right. I can protest. I wish they wouldn't do it. I can write a letter. Please do not use state university facilities. But we're not doing that now.
Thank you. I could talk to you all night. You're one of the great minds. We'll be right back. Before we go, one of my favorite places to get a good laugh these days is a video site called Bad Lip Reading, which makes hilarious parody videos involving public figures, and there's arguably no better goldmine for material than the White House press briefing and its unruly behavior. Here's a clip.
Stank?
Yeah, when is the Roswell?
You really thought to take your question? You suck. Hey, the way you talk to me, I mean, do you need to talk so evil?
Do you need to look like a stuffed baked potato in that Walmart shirt? Because you suck.
It really is funny stuff. And that's all the time we have tonight. Thank you for watching this Ingraham Angle special. I'm Jason Chafe. It's been a pleasure filling in for Laura Ingraham all this week. Laura returns from vacation on Monday. Shannon Bream and the Fox News at Night team are coming up next. Have a great weekend, everybody. Good night from New York City. May God bless you and may God bless your family. This is the greatest country on the face of the planet. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for watching us.